Hello, my reading friends. Welcome to another episode of Book Reviews with Johnny, even though I don't call it that. It is what it is, isn't it? Okay, so today my book review is about A Catskills Boyhood by Philip H. DuBois. Not that thick. Oops. Not that thick. But it took me a long time to read it, and it's not because it's not good. It's pretty awesome, and that's why I want to talk about it. But it's a certain type of book that I want to. Okay, so it's A Catskills Boyhood, My Life Along the Hudson, 1908 to 1921. Okay, so, and Philip DuBois is this boy right here. And there's a little parrot or something. I did not know if I was going to do a book review on this. So it's a type of book. Okay, it's written by a person who had quite an extraordinary life, yet he chose by the urgings of his wife to write a book about his boyhood, because that boyhood in the Catskill Mountains in the early 1900s, his wife felt, really contributed a lot to his character. And that, combined with other reasons that'll be unique to share this perspective, he spent months and months just writing little tidbits of memory from his boyhood. So this was published in 92. And what's so good about it, I found this in a bookstore in, I think it was the town of Catskill, or might have been around Hunter Mountain or something, but it was in the Catskills. And I love history, and particularly history that's colored by an actual personal experience. You know, history that is just dates and names and like big, this group and that group. It's relevant, but it's hard to relate to, right? So it's valid. It's important to get the context of what's going on, but nobody really experiences life the way history is typically written. So I think it's important to know the larger sweeps of energies and forces at play, but to understand why people are a certain way. But then it's only by reading individual experiences that we could really get a taste of a time period and really how similar people are from age to age. Of course, it gets harder and harder when you go further into history. So you got to just make do with what history books offer, or movies or documentaries, or imagination, meditation could work, channeling, all sorts of ways to get into different portals of time. Anyway, I digress. A Catskills Boyhood. I love the Catskills. I've been going there since I was probably 4 or 5. It was the first time. I live in Brooklyn, New York. Catskills are about 3 hours or so upstate New York. And it constitutes a bunch of towns and mountains and nature areas. It's really lovely. I love being there. And of course, when I go, especially the past couple times over, 5 or more years, I've been just curious, like, how did this develop? What was this like 100 years ago? What was this like 200 years ago? And then I found this book, and it's somebody telling their story. So do I recommend reading it? Well, you'd have to be interested in history of the early, 1900s. It would help if you were curious about the Catskills, or at least like rural wooded areas of the Northeast. And if you just really were curious about ordinary life at that time. So there's nothing compelling about this book. And I say that with all respect. I did read it to the end. I started it. Let me see, I bought it in the Catskills 3.5 years ago. And just finished it now. It's only 100 and some pages. It's not like I was reading it often, but I would pick it up, work on it for a little bit, put it away. Then I would see it on my shelf again, pick it up. Then I just decided, let me just slowly finish it, as long as it takes me. And I'll read a page here, page and a half a page there, until I finished it. And I want to finish it because it's a person who described his life in the early part of the 20th century. So this is before cars were commonplace. So like you really saw like what it's like to first hear about airplanes, first see cars, to first really see electricity kind of, and to hear about the Titanic when it sunk, when it was in the newspaper. And he had experience writing in newspapers, and you just get a sense of what life was like. And it's quite tame. Like that's what I mean by not compelling. It's like, this is what it's, you're sitting with your uncle, your great uncle, and he's just telling you stories about back in the day. And sometimes they're a little bit exciting. A lot of times they're not. It's just information, but it's all interesting. He's not exactly a writer, so it may not all come across super vivid, but I don't know. I learned a lot. I definitely appreciate the Catskills. It reminded me of, my family growing up in Norway, what I've heard of life there makes me appreciate things like running water and having warm places in the wintertime. I learned about ice, the ice industry. There used to be a thing where men would get work in the winter by, they would go chop blocks of ice from the lake or the river that would be sold in the city, stored in ice houses, and then sold in the city throughout the summer or the warmer months. So of course, so what was interesting also, I'm writing my autobiography, and I'm several years into the process, and I'm always using the internet to help, because I want to be as accurate as possible as I pull in dates and occurrences from here and there. So this guy wrote the book in 92. He published it in 1992. That's pre-internet, right? So he's doing all this from his memory, whatever like bits and pieces of newspaper or books at the library he might have accessed. And of course, library is going to be limited to what that region has. If you're in, he lived all over the place. So if say he's in New Mexico and then he's writing about the Catskills, what could he possibly get in a library in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, in the 90s about the Catskills? Possibly one book, not. So he had to really and then maybe correspondence, like write a letter to someone to get information. So in his case, he would just think about a theme, like, okay, I remember when I got my first job. So these are my first 3 jobs when I was a kid, a teenager. And then this was, this Boy Scout club was like this. So he'd do, say some of the themes, like Boy Scout activities, snow and ice, skating, swimming, canoeing, the Hudson River. So he just broke it down: croquet, sleeping outdoors, fun in the pine lot, my sister Grace, Dad, the Ridge, which is the place that they moved to. You think about, especially Boyhood, or childhood, which is so far away from he was, I think, well into his 70s or 80s when he wrote this. So, it's so distant. You just can only, access bits and pieces, the average person anyway. So how do you do it? So it was fascinating for me to see how he brought his childhood to life. And it's in a much different way than I am choosing my own story. But if I had no computer and no access to the internet, I would very likely write it more in that style. Especially if I was older and even further away from those memories, or maybe not in contact with friends who could or family who could verify what happened. You just write the story as you remember it. It's very, well, he is a writer. He was I think he did some newspaper writing and teaching, but I don't know that he's like an author per se. But, so he has definitely writing skill, but it's a little dry. And it is more like a reporting style. Like this is the facts. This is what happened. So there was not much excitement. A few stories were a little exciting, but nothing riveting. But that's probably how most lives are. They're just these, lives that very interesting things happen between a lot of ordinary or mundane things, and it was cool. Then he ended up living in Lebanon in the 20s or something like that, and living all over the different parts of the U.S. And he traveled all over, from Middle East all the way through Asia, going from Lebanon back home via the Trans-Siberian Railroad, Iran, Iraq, then Russia, China, Japan, then over through Canada, and then back home to wherever, I think New York. He ended up in New York or something. New York City. Anyway, I don't have that much more to say besides, Philip H. DuBois. If you're really into the Catskills history, this is worth reading. If not, maybe not this particular book, but I do recommend, or not recommend, I do want to bring your attention that ordinary people's autobiographies, and I say ordinary because, he regards himself as an ordinary person who lived a very rich, wonderful life. But he thought it would have historical value to share his tale, and his wife really encouraged him, and I'm glad he did, because like I said, that's how you learn about what his past really is, like what was a person's experience. If you just read about this group and that group and dates, it's like, what, you don't really know. But when you read about Christmas in 1911 and what they look forward to, and that gives me a picture of, or going for a hike and the fresh air, and in the early 1900s, you're like, yeah, I guess there was a lot of color and vibrancy to life back then, and what you didn't have, you didn't know you didn't have, so you just kind of enjoy what you did have. Anyway, so that's it. Until next time, keep on enjoying those books and having those questions about life guide you to seeking fulfilling and joyful answers. All right, ta-ta.